parts have come in, and parts are still on order. You would puke if you knew how much I paid for these. And these aren't even rated for the application. The next size up is a forged block style valve. This is a 3-way valve. And they were twice as much as these were. So we're just gonna make do. We got a pressure relief on this anyways. That's gonna be under the rating for this valve, so we should be fine there. The pressure compensated flow control valves, which are the magic behind what's going to make this work, which is going to save me the money of getting the super stupid expensive multi-$1,000, several $1,000 directional control valve spooled for motors is, you know, that's just not going to happen. So this is going to be super jank, but we are going to make this work. I'm going to be the only one ever operating it, so it's going to be fine. It's going to be kind of cool, actually, when you see it all said and done. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of walkthrough right now, and show you how this is going to work, because we're getting real close to getting this operational. And you know, I haven't made a full video on the breakdown of this system, so this is going to be that. As I've mentioned, this is pretty much all a junkyard build. Everything on here, the tank, the pump, the motor, everything is used or salvaged. These hoses are salvage. Everything, like, you know, the hydraulic tanks, the fuel tanks, those are repurposed. You know, I'm probably gonna end up having to replace this hydraulic tank with something bigger, but I just needed to get this current system operational to see if this gearbox was good, if the motor was good. I picked up this big drum, just sitting in the scrapyard, sitting on the ground, and had no idea really if anything was working on it, still functional. You know, if I had to, I was just gonna put a big cog system on here, run it chain drive. Luckily everything seemed to have worked, and what I had to do was get this sort of primary system here off of a, you know, standard directional control valve functional, just to see if those components were good. And then you know, as was expected, the cavitation was massive. This would completely boil over, would instantly lose half of the reservoir here just to foam from just a quick operation of the valve. So that's because these you know, standard directional control valves aren't right for motors, running them at partial. So that's why we're using the pressure compensated flow control valves, or you could use the, you know, this super expensive hydraulic directional control valve, but that's just not going to happen. So components to this here, the motor, that is a 3-cylinder Isuzu diesel, came out of a light standard, construction site light standard. This hydraulic pump is a 40 gallon per minute out of an old silage truck. All these hoses were salvaged from an employer that I used to work for that would upgrade the hoses off imported equipment whenever they would come in. These are still pretty good hoses. These are just single braid hoses versus the dual braids, which they would like to put on equipment before they would send them out to their high value customers. And yeah, the tank was at the salvage yard, about ready to get chipped up, and perfectly good, just came off a truck. I assume they wanted to repurpose the truck for something else. And yeah, all this steel is scrap. You know, the jack's new, but you know, almost everything here, these axles come off trucks in the salvage yard, rear axles. Cut the differential out, widen them, and 1-ton full floating bearings. So those, you know, a super quick and easy trailer axle modification. You know, up in Canada here anyways, brand new trailer axle is like $3,500 a piece. So, you know, as much work as it is making these, it is definitely the way to go. So now what I wanted to do here, instead of using this jank, you know, bell housing adapter, was to use Lovejoy couplers and create a bell housing like you would see on a smaller setup. This is sort of borderline what you would use a Lovejoy coupler on, but it still would have been possible. The trouble was finding Lovejoy couplers for 13 spline 7/8 shaft, which I think I could have done if I would have searched a little bit harder. But for that matter, I just went with the flex plate you know, the non-flexing flex plate, and you know, I did my best to true it, mill it down, get it balanced. It's not perfect, but I think it should be good enough for this. And we have here, this is where the pressure relief is going to go, which is an important component for these pressure compensated flow control valves, because as you dial down the flow, you're going to be restricting flow, you know, essentially. So that's going to spike your pressure, and that extra pressure is going to have to get diverted from here back to tank. And it's just good to have that safety feature in here anyways, in case you have a motor die or something like that. It doesn't explode your entire system. But this this pressure relief valve is going to be a high functioning pressure relief valve, because anytime we dial down that pressure whatsoever, it's going to be diverting all of that. So when I have this tank spinning super slow, 90% of the flow is going to be diverted out of that pressure relief back to tank. Let's see here. We have just, you know, a bunch of filters, a bunch of jank, a bunch of nastiness going back here. And then this is where the control setup is going to be. This is where I had the original directional control valve, and there's going to be a big panel here. It's going to be crazy. Yeah, I guess just stay tuned for that. And there's no point trying to explain it right now, because, you know, I barely even know what I'm doing, but it's going to be cool.